Hello, and welcome back to another brand new Doctor Who review, or rather a classic Doctor Who review, voted for by you. So, the last poll, um, even though it only had like 10 people voting on it, which I don't really care, as long as it's getting votes, the more it keeps getting votes, the more likely I am to actually post these. And yeah, I picked four stories, one of which I was almost guaranteed would win, which was Pyramids of Mars, because of when I picked it at that time, I picked it before season one wrapped up. And since we knew Sutek was back, I had a funny feeling that episode was going to be picked. And then I need to learn something that anytime I pick a Dalek story, which in this case was the very first second Doctor story, The Power of the Daleks, 99.9% of the time, or rather 100% of the time, it will be the one most voted on. So yes, in today's video, I am of course going to be reviewing Patrick Troughton's first story, The Power of the Daleks. So I literally just finished it. I spread it out over a few days because it is 6 episodes long, and I just didn't feel like sitting down for the full 150 odd minutes. Um, about approximately 150 minutes of this story. Now, this is of course fully animated because unfortunately the actual footage for the Power of the Daleks is still missing outside of the actual audio for the episode. Now, this version that I'm watching is of course the 2020 reanimated version that they've done, because I think when they first put this episode out as an animation, there was a lot of animation mistakes and stuff because it was such a rushed job. That's just what I'm guessing at, because there are two versions of this that exist. This is the 2020 3-disc special edition compared to the original release in the early 2000s. Now, what did I think of this story? It was all right, compared to the two other Dalek stories, classic Dalek stories that I have reviewed. Day of the Dalek and Revelations of the Dalek. This is definitely better than those two. Um, but I still thought it was okay. Now, I believe this is the first fully animated story that I've watched from beginning to end. The only other time I've seen animation would be in, of course, The 10th Planet, which was one of the first classic Doctor Who reviews that I'd done this year. And I didn't have any issues with it. The animation was pretty good, It was not as great as The 10th Planet, but it was near enough that close to just how good it was. So the story is basically the Doctor is freshly regenerated. Ben and Polly have no idea what's going on because, the Doctor has changed faces. And they're trying to figure out if he is the Doctor or not, because the Doctor went from being grumpy old William Hartnell to now Beatles haircut Patrick Troughton. And this isn't the first Patrick Troughton story I have seen. The first ever Patrick Troughton story I seen in full was The Mind Robber. I had, of course, seen him in The Three Doctors as well as The Two Doctors. But the first proper full story that I seen him in was not the Power of the The Mind Robber. Um, and so from what I've seen of Patrick Troughton, I do like him. However, in this story, he still hasn't found his. It is his first story, but he still isn't his the Patrick Troughton that I would know from the early stories. If I can get that bit of psoriasis out of my hair. So yeah, they end up landing on the planet of Vulcan, and there was an examiner that gets killed. The Doctor finds his corpse and puts on the examiner patch, and they're brought into the colony to inspect this capsule that was found in this mud bath of sort of thing. And eventually the Doctor goes inside, manages to get inside it, and what's inside? 3 Daleks, of course, and they're out of juice. But then there was one of the Daleks is gone missing, and we do see the Dalek creature slide under the door. Now, this is kind of where I wish we still had some surviving episodes for. Because there are certain things that I would have loved to have seen the 60s version of, not just the animated version of, such as in this case, the Dalek mutant sliding underneath the door. Because from the dialogue that I heard, it sounded like it looked like a claw. Um, Instead of the actual mutant embryo that we see in this animated story. And then, of course, in episode 4, the end of episode 4, we see the whole Dalek production line of all the Daleks being made. I would have loved to seen that original footage of because I think it would have, again, being the 60s and low budget, I would have loved that look and the aesthetic of it. So eventually we learn that there's these rebels that are trying to overthrow the governor, and that they are using the Daleks to help them. The Daleks come out and say, "Oh, we are your servants." They even get rid of their extermination gun, and it reminded me of course, the series 5, episode 3, Victory of the Daleks. But in my opinion, this was done better. And the Daleks are trying to keep up this ploy of, oh, we're just your servants, and they almost slip up a few times, and they had to catch themselves. Where one of the Daleks was like, the Daleks are better. Oh no, the Daleks are different from humans. He's originally the Dalek was originally going to say like, oh no, the Daleks are way better than human beings. What the fuck are you on about? But he had to catch himself to continue on this ploy. So they're trying to siphon power into their capsules in order to build more Daleks. And like I said, in episode 4, one of the scientists stumbles across that and he freaks the fuck out. Eventually, the Doctor does get captured, so does Polly and Ben. And eventually, the Doctor was proven right that they should have stopped the Daleks here and there. And then the Daleks just go on and killing everyone and such. And then the Doctor manages to stumble his way into defeating them by getting rid of their energy surge. And it's interesting because at this point they're still relying on static electricity, which was something that was of course mentioned in the very first Dalek story, the Daleks. And I'm not sure when they stopped needing to rely on static to be able to move around, because that was one of the big things for them. So my guess is either it just doesn't get mentioned in the other Dalek stories that Patrick Troughton has, or it's just a plot point that doesn't get brought up again, and it's just assumed that they have fixed that fatal flaw that they can move now. Because obviously we've had Dalek stories where they're able to move on all terrains, so that means they must have been able to advance in a way to not rely on the need for static to be able to move. So yeah, like I said, the animation was good. It doesn't hold a candle to episode 4 of the 10th Planet, but it's still good. But Patrick Troughton, as this is his first story, he doesn't feel like the Doctor to me. I was waiting for me to feel that, and after the 6 episodes, but it just doesn't. Now I also need to say to myself that regeneration doesn't exist at this point. It's only referred to as renewal, offhandedly, and it's not really explained because it's not until around this time with Patrick Troughton does the Time Lords get mentioned, and he has the planet of origin on Gallifrey and stuff, and even when he regenerates into the third Doctor, it's not even referred to as regeneration. It's just referred to as you've changed once before, you can change again. I don't think it's actually fully mentioned as regeneration until the third Doctor's regeneration. But yeah, he just didn't feel like the Doctor to me. Now, again, like I said, this is early days. I need to not think of this as with my modern Doctor Who mindset. I had to kind of force myself to think of none of this has come about yet, in the story. But as a story, as a Dalek story, it's all right. I had some enjoyment out of it. There are bits that, again, like I said, I would have loved to see the original footage of, because I think it would have looked that bit better. Not that bit better, but it would have been nice to see how they went about it, back in 1966, when this episode originally aired. But yeah, that's all I really have to say for this episode. It's all right, Will it be one that I return to? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe if I go to talk about each individual Doctor's first story, maybe not. I'm not 100% sure. But that for right now, that has been my review for Power of the Daleks. Now, let's get on to the vote. So, 1 hour, as always, after this video has gone live, there will be a vote to vote on what's the next classic Doctor Who episode that I review for the 26th of this month. And here are your 4 options. I made sure not to include a Dalek story, because if I included a Dalek story, I know that's going to be picked. So, we have one First Doctor story, we have one Third Doctor story, we have one Fifth Doctor story, and we have one Seventh Doctor story that I believe is making a reappearance. The First Doctor story is definitely making a reappearance, I believe. And that is the very First Doctor story I've ever seen. And that is The War Machines. Now, once again, any comments that are on this video on what you would like to see me review will not count. Even though I keep saying this, but no one actually does that. Thankfully, people do listen. So it'll only count on the poll. I'm always going to say that just in case. So yeah, The War Machines was the very first William Hartnell story I ever seen. So that is the first one up to bat. It's actually the first story where, it's a companion exit, but we also get to meet Ben and Polly, who I don't really like. I forgot to mention that. Mainly Ben. I don't like Ben. So the Third Doctor story is, of course, actually the first Third Doctor story. And that is The Spearhead from Space. I've only ever seen episode 1 of The Spearhead from Space. I haven't seen the rest of the story. I've only ever seen episode 1, which was on one of those single discs that you could get sometimes in the newspaper. So yeah. Now, the Fifth Doctor story is Black Orchid, which is only a 2-part story that I know next to nothing about. So, yeah. And lastly, the Seventh Doctor story is the last of the classic Doctor Who stories, and that is Survival. An episode I have not seen. Of course, seen clips of it over the years, but it is one that I have not seen. So that is that. Those are your 4 options. Once again, it is The War Machines, Spearhead from Space, Black Orchid, and Survival. So let me know what you thought of the Power of the Daleks in the comments down below if you have seen it. And once again, that poll will go live 1 hour after this video has been posted, 4 p.m. GMT +1. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I shall see you all for my review of the final Predator film that I need to see, which is Prey. So I shall see you all on Monday for that one.